Good morning, grade 10s. Welcome to our subject guidance session in which I'll give you an overview of your upcoming literature exam and make one or two suggestions that you can follow in the preparation for it. Remember, it counts as task 7.2 on your assessment planner, but it's basically your literature exam for June that I'll be discussing. Remember that this is being recorded and you'll be able to access it at a later stage on the OLP, and then you can work through it at your leisure in the preparation of your exam. So what can you expect in this? This is your exam where we can question you on all of your poetry done so far, and on your novel, The Fault in Our Stars. And remember that we will question you on as far as we have got to in your study guides by now. But if you have read ahead, that's also fine. You can make mention of things that are coming up. And we will ask you questions about your drama, Amadeus, as far as you've read to now. Remember, you have 2.5 hours in which to complete this exam, and it is for 80 marks. So you have more than enough time, grade 10s, to be able to get through everything for it. All right, I have previously in other sessions gone through the different types of critical thinking questions that you can expect. So I've just given you a table here with them all in. I would suggest that you run your eye over these critical thinking questions so that you know what's expected of you when we use a question like this in our question. So I think things that are important for you, especially now in the FET phase, are the question words like comment on the effectiveness of something, to justify your answer or to substantiate your answer. Those are generally your higher order thinking question words, and expect of you to make a statement, elaborate on that statement, and find evidence from the text to support what you have to say. So run your eye over them, make sure you are comfortable with what each of these question words is expecting of you. All right, so in the build-up to an exam, I think it's best that you know what to expect so that when you open your exam up on that morning, it's not something brand new in front of you, but that you also don't waste time trying to figure out the questions and instructions. So I'd like you to run your eye over this list of instructions that you can expect on the day so that you know what to do. A few things that I want to point out to you. I would like you to try and attempt to answer every question there is, because your marker can't look for a possible mark if you haven't written anything there. So even if you think it is so wrong, rather put your answer down on paper. You never know, you might get one of your marks. There are quite a few sections or questions in this paper, and you need to make sure that you choose your right questions to answer. Remember that if you choose to answer the novel essay, you need to then do the contextual of your drama and vice versa. I would like you to answer number your answers in the same order as the question paper. So even if there's an error, please keep the same numbering so that it correlates to your memo. And remember as well, grade 10s, we would like you to write your answers in as dark a pen as possible. Remember, when you scan it in for us and it comes out on our side as a PDF, it's a little faint already. So we need to make sure it is completely legible for your marker to read. All right, so neatness and the dark pen will definitely assist you. All right, so what can you expect in this exam? I will be giving you a past paper as an example for you to work through and see what I mean with question words. But if we break it down into a description, section A is your poetry section. So it's what we call your prescribed poetry, or the poetry you've studied with us. You need to answer any two of these questions. All right, so if you answer the essay question on the poem, you can then answer one other poem. All right, and or if you do the two contextual questions on poetry, that's also fine. But there's a compulsory question for your unseen poem. You have no choice. You must answer the unseen poetry question. So you'll end up with 3 sets of answers for this section. All right, so just some important concepts of poetry that you can revise. I think we've covered this extensively in your study guide. So just a reminder, take each of your seen poems that you've studied thus far, lay them out in front of you, and then find these terms in each of those poems. This is a good way for you to prep for your poetry. Find the theme in each of your poems. Remember, your theme is that sort of deeper message, the deeper lesson we can learn from the poem. Take a look at their form. So how are they structured? Is it perhaps a sonnet? Is it perhaps a free verse poem? You need to designate that for each of the poems that you've got. And then you can look at specific words or phrases that the poet has used. So the diction, are any of these words repeated? Is there a purpose for the repetition? Is there specific jargon being used? Then you can pick up on the tone of the poem, all right? And that's generally the attitude of the poet that also comes through there. So how would the poet have read the poem is often a good way for you to start. And then obviously being poetry, there's going to be your imagery that comes out. So find the imagery in each of your poems. So are there figures of speech being used? Is there certain literary devices being used? Is there onomatopoeia being used? All of these things help us to build a picture, paint a picture in our minds when we read the poem. Rhyme and rhythm, remember, the rhythm is the pace at which we read the poem, and this is often created by clever use of punctuation, or perhaps the poet has used enjambment, so the run-on lines from one line to the next, or sometimes it's the type of word that's been used that can slow down or speed up how we read the poem. Also, if there's end rhyme, that will help create rhythm, all right? Or if there's rhyming words in the middle of lines as well, so your internal rhyme. All of that can contribute to rhythm. All right, so in your poetry essay, I thought I would give you a quick little description. If you choose to do this question, all right, the more you practice, the better you become at it. All right, so you need to not only hone your skills in critical writing, but you need to be able to include evidence from the poems that you have studied. So make sure that your introductory paragraph contains what we call your thesis statement, your opening statement, your main statement. And you will often be able to take the question word, the question itself, and reword it as your thesis statement. Your imagery must always be discussed in an essay. Just assume you must figure out what are the figures of speech and discuss what the figure of speech is, what two things are being compared, and how is it effective? What does it make us imagine? The form of the poem must be discussed in your essay. So the type of the poem, the structure of the poem, discuss what type of stanzas it has. Is there a rhythm that's created? Is there a rhyme scheme that you can note? Think of like if there's a conceit that's been discussed there. Think about if there's a paradox that's being given to you. All of these things need to be discussed if you hope to get at least 8 out of 10 for your poetry. So tone, diction, and imagery must be discussed if you choose to do the essay on the poem. Remember your SEE, you're going to make your statement, you're going to elaborate, and you're going to find evidence from the poem to support what you have to say here. Right, how do you approach the unseen poem then? Well, just a few things you can do before you go into the exam. So as your preparation the day before or 2 days before, you're going to think about, you're going to zone in on the title of the poem that we've given you. Perhaps it links to the message that the poet was trying to get across to you. You're going to read the poem through twice, at least twice. Don't think you don't need to read through the poem. You're going to look at each stanza then. So you're going to start with the title, you're going to look at the poem as a whole, and then you're going to go to each stanza. Does the poem flow from one stanza to the next? Does it make sense what's happening there? How many stanzas are there? And inside the stanzas, how many lines are there in each stanza? Does that tell you then that it is a quatrain? Is it a tercet? Perhaps it's just a rhyming couplet. Those are things that you can look for. Then you can look at the type of word being used by the poet. Are there repeated words? Are there phrases that are repeated? Does it link to the theme? Is he reinforcing his message with it? You can then look at the tone or the mood of the poem. It often comes across in the imagery that's been described to us. Is there a deeper underlining meaning to all of these words being used? And then think about what the purpose of the poem could be. Why did the poet write this poem? Did he want to teach us a lesson? Did he want to tell us how he's feeling? Things like that. Things that you can control before going into the exams is going over things like your figures of speech, personification, simile, metaphor. Think of your sound devices. Is there onomatopoeia? Is there alliteration? Or is there assonance? Think of the types of poems that we could ask you. Could it be a sonnet? Are there 14 lines? Is it free verse, perhaps? And then, of course, go back to those question words that I gave you earlier and make sure you understand what the question word is expecting of you. All right, if you choose to do the essay for your poem, there's a specific poetry rubric then for that type of essay, and I'd like you to always have a look at your rubric before you go into the exam. So run your eye over it, see how you can get your best possible 10 marks here out of the 10 marks. Remember, if you've written a creative essay, you're going to get 0. So don't think that you can just use the title of the poem and then write your own short story. You need to discuss the poem in terms of style, diction, imagery that's been used, the structure of the poem. Doesn't matter what our topic is, those 4 aspects can always be linked to the topic we've given you. Take a look at your rubric so that you know what to expect. Right, in the section where we examine you on your novel, all right, remember you can go back to your literature study guide, you can take a look at page 65 and onwards, and please keep in mind that the tasks and activities that we prepared for you in your study guide are geared towards preparing you for the critical thinking skills that you need in the exam. Remember, if you choose to do the contextual of the novel, then you must do the essay question for the drama, and the same applies elsewhere. All right. Right, just a few things that I thought I would give you my thoughts on your novel. All right, so think about the elements of the novel that you can relate to certain symbols that have come out in the novel so far. Perhaps you can think of other characters who are associated with these symbols. Think back to the time in the plot where you read about this symbol, what was happening at the time, who was talking, how did it change the character's attitude maybe? Did it change your attitude towards that character? All right, so think of Gus's cigarettes and the funky bones and the grenade and the idea of going to Amsterdam, that swing, all right, that Hazel, that comes up around Hazel all the time there. Think of certain themes around that have come up in your novel. Coming of age, The Fault in Our Stars, contains all of the traditional elements of the coming of age narrative. Think of the theme of life and death. We have 2 characters here who are literally living that theme. Think of the theme of family, about being different, not only in society, but also in your family, how religion plays a role for our characters, what is their philosophy around life. I thought I would just give you these things to think about from a different voice and a different person's perspective around your novel. Right, when it comes to your play, your drama around Amadeus, I thought I would point out 1 or 2 things that I have an idea about. Remember Amadeus, certain themes like your duty and responsibility, so the duty of being a noble, about being worthy of being devoted to. What is the responsibility of the upper class? How does Salieri turn his back on his noble commitments when he feels that God favors Mozart? What is, think about the theme of betrayal when he thinks that God has betrayed him by giving somebody else such a worthy talent as well. Is he allowed to feel unworthy? How could we pick him up out of that feeling? Why does he feel betrayed? The themes of justice and injustice, right? As a result of what he thinks is God's injustice, what does Salieri decide to do? How does he exact revenge on Mozart? The idea of creativity and imagination. All right. Think of Salieri's link to God, his relationship with religion. Think about how he bargains for something there, right? The promises he makes, those are quite significant. And then generally, your overall theme here is the beauty of music. You know, he finds absolute beauty in music, and he asks God to grant him this gift. But then, how does he feel when God grants the same gift to Mozart? You know, think about those themes. I thought I'd just prompt you with a few of my own ideas there. All right, so I hope they're useful. I hope they've made you think about something. All right, the structure of your literary essay. So if you do choose to answer the literary essay in your exam, Remember, in your introduction, you can simply take our topic and restate it as a statement. It can be a very short paragraph, this one. Think of the keywords in the question that stand out for you and put them into your opening statements. In the body of your essay, remember each paragraph needs to focus on a new idea that you then develop. You're going to make your statements, you're going to elaborate on this idea a little bit, and you're going to give evidence from the text to support it. Remember, that evidence could be a quote that you've remembered, that you've learned, you've banked it in your quote bank in your brain, or you can paraphrase. You can simply retell a part of the plot quickly. But remember, you don't want to be repetitive. You don't repeat the whole plot of the essay, because then you're not focusing in on the topic we've given you. All right, the conclusion to your literary essay is quite important. Your closing paragraph needs to be a quick little brief discussion, a summary of your discussion. Don't retell anything from the plot here, and definitely don't include a new point. Do a quick check of your style in the exam. Have you used your present tense when you've discussed the actions of the novel or the play? Have you mentioned the title of the play? Have you even written it correctly? Have you spelled the characters' names correctly? All right, that's always the embarrassing part, all right, if you've got that wrong. Have you connected paragraphs in a sophisticated way using transition words, linking words? Have you quoted? Have you written your quotes correctly? Have you paraphrased rather? Okay. Checkpoints that you can use here in your essay. Make sure that you've got your topic, that you focused on your topic. Did you keep track of it? In each of your points, did you make sure it was related to the topic of the question we gave you? Did you show evidence from the text? If you quoted, did you quote properly? Did you use inverted commas? If you are integrating it as part of a sentence, does your sentence flow properly? Did you write in a more formal way? Remember, don't include any slang here. In your structure of your essay, did you have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion at least? But you can have more paragraphs in your body. Do a quick spell check, a punctuation check. Have you kept your word count? And try not to be too casual when you are writing this essay. Again, if you've done the essay, we will use a similar rubric for your novel or the drama essay. All right, and what I want you to do is have a look at it beforehand so that you know what's coming. If you have written a completely creative essay, you're going to get 0. Your essay must relate back to the topic we've given you and to either the novel or the drama that you're focusing on. Take a look at the criteria throughout the rubric beforehand so that you know what you need to do to get the best possible mark for it. So what does an actual exam look like? I thought I would give you a past paper, but I just want to remind you that if your poetry list for this year is different to the poems that are in this past paper, then just use those poems as a practice. Right, I'm only going to look at the different types of questions that you can expect. I'm not going to work through everything with you. You can take your time afterwards and go through it. Right, so if you're going to do the essay for your poem, remember you must do 2 seen poems and your question 5, which is your unseen poem. So if you do the essay, you must do 1 more contextual and you must do the unseen poem. To receive the distinction, so your 80% for this question, you need to focus on tone, diction, and imagery, and you must link it to the topic we've given you. And all of this you would have already covered when you were preparing the poems for the exam. All right. If you're going to do your contextual questions for poetry, let's look at 1 or 2 questions there. Question 2 says refer to a stanza line, and then you must discuss why the speaker uses rhetorical questions. So we're checking that you know what a rhetorical question is. So you must identify it, and you must explain the rhetorical question. Question 3 says discuss the significance of the title of the poem. Again, significance means there's a deeper meaning. What is it? What does it help the reader to imagine? Question 4 says critically comment on the difference between the newborn and the blind desire. So critically comment, give your answer, elaborate on it a bit, and give evidence from the text. Remember, you have a choice in the poetry section, so don't forget to do a second poem. All right. Again, looking quickly at certain questions there. Question 2 says list 2 poetic techniques. This means you must know what a poetic technique is. All right. So, and if you have to list it, it means you can literally go find it in the poem itself. Is there repetition? Has he used figures of speech? Has he used enjambments? Is there no punctuation being used? Those are all poetic techniques that you can think about. Question 4 says, critically comment. So again, you're going to give your statement, elaborate on it a bit, and find evidence to support it. Remember, those questions are generally for 3 marks. Explain how the speaker uses dialect there in question 3. This means you need to know what a dialect is. If you've studied the poem beforehand, which you must have, then you'll know what dialect is. All right, in question 4, if you choose to do this poem, it says critically comment on the effectiveness of this line. Again, how does it help us to imagine what the poet is describing? Look at it, it's 3 marks. Make your statements, elaborate on your answer, find evidence from the text to get your 3 marks. Question 5 is your compulsory section. All right, so question 5 says list 2 materials. You can literally go back to the poem and find the answer to that type of question. Okay, and generally for home language, the questions will run in chronological order to the poem, but we will make you jump around a bit in the higher order thinking question. In section B, you're going to do your novel. It focuses you on your novel. Remember, if you choose the contextual for the novel, you must do the essay for the drama. But if you do the essay for the novel, you do the contextual for the drama. Pay attention to the word counts when it comes to choosing the essay. If you have a look at this essay, it refers your answer must focus on Hazel, Grace, Augustus, Waters, Hazel's parents, and Isaac. So you must mention those characters in your essay. All right. If you're looking at the contextual part of it, look at question 7.1 there. It says places, extracting context. We are checking to see that you know what's happened before and after this contextual. We're basically making sure that you've read the novel. All right. Question 4 there says discuss the irony. So you need to know what the irony is. What is irony? Make that clear in your answer as well. Question 6 there says motivate your response. So you're going to give your answer to the question, but you're motivated by finding evidence from the text that suits your answer. Question 8 there says, do you agree with the statements? Discuss. So although this question asks you whether you agree or not, you must base your answer on what you've read in the novel. All right, so make sure you link it back to some reference to the novel. In the Amadeus section, again, look at your word counts. And again, you must look carefully at what your topic says. It says critically discuss the validity. So you must discuss if the statement is true. If you say it's not true, then you must discuss this. And each time you're going to link it back to the topic by reminding the marker of what your original statement was. What was the original topic? All right. In the contextual questions, we're using the question word account for, in question 9.1. Account for means to explain. Question 3 there says discuss Culturina's significance. Significance? What is her role? How is she important to the plot of the play? Question 9.4 says places, extracting context. Again, we're checking that you've read the drama. Briefly say what happens before and after this extract. Question 6 says refer to both body language and tone of voice in your answer. So don't be creative and go and make up a whole creative answer here. You base your idea on how the character must say these words because you know what happens in the plot. How does he say it? Based on what you know happens in the plot. Question 7 says comment critically. Again, make your statements, elaborate a bit, find evidence from the text to support it. It's for 3 marks, great hands. Justify your answer in the last question there. Provide evidence from the play to support your answer. So I really hope that I've covered any insecurities you might have had around your play. I've given you an example of a past paper that you can work through. Remember that you can go through your study guides comprehensively. They are more than adequate to prepare you for your exam. And then make sure that you do all of that preparation timeously beforehand. Don't go and scramble the day before and try and get through your novel and the play and all of your poetry. All right, I think you've got this, and I wish you well. Have a good rest of your day.